Welcome. Thanks for joining me as we learn about the Pythagorean Theorem. This is a theorem that we can use in right triangles. As we've already covered, a right triangle has one 90-degree angle. That will be marked with the little square or box in the corner. Like all other triangles, it has three sides. The side across from that right angle is called the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is the longest side, and it does not touch that right angle. The other two sides are called legs. They can be equal, but typically are not. And again, it's important to know which one is the hypotenuse. So make sure you can identify that across from the 90-degree angle, the biggest side is the hypotenuse. Before we get into the actual formula, we're going to start with a visual representation of the Pythagorean theorem. So I started off with a right triangle, has sides 3, 4, and 5. Then I went ahead and I made a square on each of those sides. Let's start by looking at this smallest side. Okay, so when the side length is 3, I can find the area by counting the number of squares. Take a moment and figure out how many squares is in that area of the triangle on the left. There are 9 squares. Again, you could have gotten that by counting, or maybe you did 3 times 3. Now let's look at the square on the bottom, where it's 4 across. Again, go ahead and count those squares to find the area. You could also find that area by taking 4 times 4. So that square has an area of 16. And finally, the top square. That square is 5 by 5. Gives you an area of 25. One thing you might notice is if you look at the area of the squares, if I add the small areas together, 9 plus 16, it equals 25. So the area of the small square plus the area of the middle square equals the area of the largest square. And that's actually called the Pythagorean theorem. So formally, we would write this as in a right triangle with legs A and B and hypotenuse C, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. We can use this to find the length of the missing hypotenuse if we know the two legs. Sometimes instead of A squared plus B squared equals C squared, I've had students refer to it as leg squared plus the other leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. Now we're going to go through a couple problems together. And this is one of those formulas where we're going to do it step by step. Keeping your work organized is really important. So before we do the Pythagorean theorem, we're going to make sure it's a right triangle. And for these steps that we know two legs. We're going to square one leg. Remember, squaring means multiplying by itself. We're going to square the other leg, add them together, and take the square root. So to help set this up step by step, I've color-coded the worksheets. So again, it's really important that we just go through each step and take our time. So let's do number 4 together. So A, we're going to make sure we have a right triangle and that we know the legs. Let's fill the legs in. I see one of the legs is 5. The other leg is 12. Okay, then I square the first leg. In that case, it means I'm going to take 5 squared. You probably want to use your calculator to square. Hopefully you found the squared button on your calculator. So I'm going to do 5 squared. Whoops. Sorry. So 5 squared equals 25. If you can't find the square key, remember square means multiplying it by itself. So I could also take 5 times 5. Make sure you can find that 5 squared is 25. Step C, square the second leg. Okay, the second leg was 12. So now I want 12 squared. So back on the calculator. First, I'm going to go use the squared key. So 12 squared is 144. Or again, showing you how I could take 12 times 12. Step D says add the 2 squares. So I want the first answer from B, which was 25, plus my answer from C, which was 144. Go ahead and you can use your calculator. 25 plus 144 is 169. Then our last step is to take the square root. So again, this is a time you'll need your calculator. So go back and look at your calculator and make sure in the last assignment you figured out how to do those steps. In this calculator, I take 169, then push the square root key. So the square root of 169 is 13. And we have found our answer. That's the hypotenuse. Do a quick check and make sure that it still is the longest side. That's a way to just maybe double check that you didn't make a mistake. I'm going to do one more as an example. And again, I'm going to walk through the steps. After you practice this, you might be able to do more of these without writing it fully out. But you should be able to show your work and keep things really organized so you don't miss something. Okay, so first, looking at the picture. The legs are those 2 short sides that touch the right angle. It doesn't matter which one I pick first. So I have 10 and 18. In step B, I'm going to square that first leg. So I'm taking 10 squared. 10 squared is 100. Now we'll repeat that for the second leg. So we're going to take 18 squared, which is 324. Step D, add those 2 squares. So 100 plus 324 equals 424. And finally, we take the square root of that. So let's see what the square root of 424 is. Okay, you'll notice this time it's not a whole number. A lot of the problems I created, I did make so your answers were whole numbers. There are some that will be decimals. We're going to round to 1 decimal place. Remember, in order to do that, you look at the number in the second place. If it's 5 or above, it bumps the 10th place up. So our answer will be 20.6. So our right triangle with legs 10 and 18 has a hypotenuse of 20.6. You're now ready to try some of these on your own. Again, on the worksheet, in many of them, I used that format where the steps are written out for you. Please go ahead and duplicate that if that's helpful. You square one leg, square the other, add them together, and take the square root. You guys can do it.